Why are you willing? The question is, why are you willing to just be another cog in the wheel of everyday life? Why aren't you willing to disrupt? So if you start to disrupt and you do that with enough things, you will be known for that. The things that you most commonly do as a company is what you and I will be known as. And if I am sort of disinterested and
how different would it be if the same thing started looking now like it wouldn't change if nothing else really did? Subscribe and hit this like button and share this with a friend. Hey, this is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. This is Christian D. Evans coming at you. I thank you so much for listening to this. We interview top-level 8- and 9-figure entrepreneurs, business owners, and CEOs that have either had an exit or they are actually running and scaling their business to that billion-dollar valuation. We've also interviewed top-level TEDx speakers as well as incredible psychologists, also a lot of wealth managers that manage $1 billion to $200 billion and more. We've had incredible guests like Sachin Kajarian, Cameron Harold, Jay Abraham, and so many others. So if you find this of value, then share this with a friend. And we really appreciate it. Guys, show our guests some love by liking this and subscribing. And guys, until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can, and enjoy the episode. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, as always, Christian D. Evans. Now, when CEO Magazine wrote its article of words of wisdom from the world's greatest branding experts, it grabbed quotes from Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, Gary Vaynerchuk, Seth Godin, Richard Branson, and other brilliant business leaders. But also leading the list is our next guest, which I'm very excited about having him on. He has been featured in Forbes Incorporated, the New York Times, Adweek, Huffington Post, Business Insider, so many others. He has worked with companies and corporations like Rolling Stones, Trump Organization, Damon John, Grant Cardone, and so many others. He is also the Branding Bible, an Amazon bestseller, Brand Intervention, and also known as the Slayer of the Mundane. Please welcome my next guest, CEO of DBD International, David Brier. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Well, I really want to make sure that we don't stay too much in the beginning and the basics of branding. And I know what I'm excited about. I was listening to a lot of interviews, and I want to just hit it off with a straight, right diving into it. In one of your interviews, you talk about making your product or service stand out, basically decommoditizing your product or service. And I'd love for you to just kind of start with that, unpack that. What does that mean, and how do you do that?
Well, okay. So the interesting thing about it actually starts with, in my opinion and in my experience, so I've experienced this personally, is we're taught a particular trade. We're taught to either be a CPA, or to be a salesperson, or to be a designer, or to be a this or thater. What they don't teach us is the stuff that actually is the 90% of the stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis to actually stand out. They don't teach us the art of storytelling. They don't teach us the ability to negotiate. They don't teach us that, hey, by the way, flaunting your shit isn't the most important thing in the room. Maybe you should actually be focusing on your client or your customer. These little things. And how do you actually sell, not as to be a supplier or a vendor or a retailer, but actually in such a way that your relationship with your customer or your client is like they feel like you're on the same side of the table as they are, right? Those are the relationships we love. I love the fact that there are certain people that I do business with, and I can call up and say, hey, Bob, hey, Janet, hey, Sylvia, hey, whatever. It's like, they're buddies. They're in my circle. They're in my corner. They're not like, hi, can I speak to so-and-so? I know it just doesn't have that distance, right?
So let me ask you this, because you mentioned this, and I see so many people trying to decommoditize their offer. And there's a lot of talk about their product, their service, and the offer on the front end. And obviously, you talk about it in contextual of the brand itself.
Yeah.
And so, is there a little bit of the offer as well, and decommoditizing that, or is it mostly you're looking at the bigger picture, and maybe the bowl itself is the brand, and everything else is fit in that? So, kind of explain that for me.
Totally. Well, first of all, we've got to. It's so important to get out of pitch mode. Because pitch mode is going to be like, hey, let us tell you all about our features. Let us tell you why you should choose us. It's like who, first of all, outside of a sales discussion, quote unquote, who talks that way? Nobody. How about we actually talk? It's like they go to say, hey, Christian. So you know what, man? Here's the thing. I've been thinking about your thing, and it kept me up last night. At which point you probably go, what do you mean? I'd go, well, here's the deal. You mentioned XYZ problem that you were encountering, and you know what? I dealt with the same guy. Like I've lowered it to a conversation. So that right there starts the decommoditization process, because I'm no longer pitching my wares. I'm no longer pitching my product versus other products. I'm actually talking with you. It's a more conversational and more humane approach. So that's one point. But the other thing is that there are two races that happen. There's the race to the top, which is what I call like, okay, oh, they've got 12 benefits, we have 13. Oh, they've got 13, we have 18. They have 18, we have 22. And it's like, dude, you can only offer so many features and benefits before it just becomes ridiculous. And that's the race to the top. The race to the bottom is, oh, they could do it. They could offer you that for $1,000. We could do it for $995, and we'll throw in a three set of ginkgo knives. You know what I mean? Just because you start devaluing, it's got to go outside of that. People buy based on values, which aligns. It's kind of like a cousin to what many know is like Simon Sinek. It's like people don't buy your what, they buy the why, right? It kind of parallels, because if I'm connecting with you on something that is timeless versus something that is not. Something that is timeless will be like Nike doesn't say, hey, cooler synthetics, cooler design. Hey, dudes. No, they say, just do it. Just do it is timeless. The styles will change. The materials will change. The different designs will change. The technologies will change, but just do it. And even when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, right? And he came back and he goes, you know, we have these legion of people and we're on fumes. We're in intensive care right now. Okay. And that's why they had to get that infusion of cash from Bill Gates. Bill Gates knows, you know, there's God and the devil, right? You got to have the good and the bad. You always got to have your hero and your villain, right? So that is so he was like, okay, we're going to drop the money, because that's going to ultimately, it's still going to keep everything alive. Otherwise, it becomes a Microsoft world. And now you're the Goliath that everyone hates. It's better to have the hero and the villain. So when Steve Jobs came back, he was like, what? He connected to something again, timeless. Think different. So the thing is when we're actually looking at decommoditizing and actually, how do we go bigger? Because each of those cases I just gave you, just do it, think different. They went bigger and to something timeless that you and I can relate to, whether we're sitting on the freaking couch, eating nachos and watching, binge watching something, or we're like, exercising, 4 hours a day. We could relate to it. So timelessness and values will trump the other stuff, because it's the bigger thing that we can all connect to. It's the connecting strand.
Now, you mentioned hero and villain, and I appreciate you sharing this, because you are really heavy on the story that the brand tells. And I love that, because you and I know from being in sales or just in speaking or whatever, it's about stories and eliciting some sort of emotion. So I'd love for you to just kind of unpack the hero, the villain. And I know you have really cool, amazing case studies on your website there, Rising Above the Noise.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to just kind of explain a little bit about when you're looking at a company, and maybe just take a random case study that you've worked with that has like this, I think I saw one was like in the HVAC space, like how creative can you be? But you actually were able to unpack that. And I just thought that was really cool, because we think HVAC, how could you be that different? But you created a really cool hero and villain kind of story and structure around it, and been able to create and generate amazing results. But I'd love for you maybe to just explain that a little bit further for our audience.
Yeah, totally. So the thing that happens on their particular thing is like with the HVAC guys. I mean, you hear HVAC and you go, huh? What could be exciting about that? And I'll tell you, here's the basic thing. So these guys, and it's and this is an important lesson. I mean, this particular point I'm going to mention right now is vitally important. Any of us as entrepreneurs or as businesses, what we have as a superpower, oftentimes we can easily overlook. One, because we're too close to it. Two, because it's what we eat for breakfast. It's not special in our eyes, right? right? It's our standard. If we're not rising to that standard just organic, if we're rising that standard organically, it's not an unusual stretch. It's not something different. So, these particular guys, it took 7 actual phone calls with the entrepreneur after they said, yes, we need your help. We need your help in rebranding us. And I was like, well, so here's the interesting thing. I said, so what is it that you're doing different? All you've told me is we're doing something revolutionary. Like, good. What is that? Well, blah, 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 blah. And it kind of like, it was like around on the fringe, but they never got, and it literally took about 7 phone calls. And when he finally said, well, here's what we're doing, ba-bum. And it wasn't that he was unwilling to tell it. It was that it was so obvious to him what he was saying. And anybody that has ever dealt with engineers knows this to be true. And engineers, they're like geeks and like nerds. That universe that they live in is so obvious to them. It's so apparent. How could you not understand what I'm saying is kind of like their mindset. But it's easy because nothing's coming out of your freaking mouth. Okay. It's like, it might be obvious between your ears, but it's got to transport from your lips to the airwaves so that I can hear it and understand it. Because these guys were called, and I always pronounce it wrong. I always say thermasi. They're like, and they always said, David, it's not thermasi, it's thermosai. I said, by the way, how am I supposed to know that? That would always be, because I would always say thermasi. And they would say, I said, how many people mispronounce it? He goes, about 50%. I said, what a great thing to have a name that actually 50% of the people mispronounce it. How is that supposed to spread easily and organically? So besides it being what it is, thermasi or thermosai, I looked at all of their competitors, and their competitors were the usual suspects. It was Lennox, and it was Daikin, and it was Train and Carrier, all these usual guys. Well, that was like, okay, those are like big multi-million or billion-dollar companies. They've been around for a long time. How are we going to introduce a new conversation? That was my problem. How do I, now that I understood what they did, here was the interesting thing. First of all, I said, the first revolution in indoor climate control since 1919. There was actually a woman who actually patented the first furnace in the United States in 1919. That was the first thing. So you always have to introduce a disruption. If you are repeating what others have heard in your brand narrative, you simply are reminding them of your industry. You're not actually reminding them of your brand. That's like key number 1. So if you're saying something it doesn't matter. You could be the most enthusiastic person in the world. You could be the most persuasive. You could be the most charismatic, but you're repeating, echoing what they've heard 50 times, 100 times, 500 times, 1,000, 5,000 times before. So you have to disrupt. Otherwise, you will not be heard as you. So that's the first thing. So what happens is here's what we actually came up with in terms of narrative, right? I basically said, hey, the same scientific breakthrough that made the invisible visible has now revolutionized indoor climate control, saving up to 41% on energy bills. And I hope they're listening to this, because right now they should be cashing in big time with everyone's energy bills. But the thing is so, and I continued, our UL verified technology, okay, that gives it legitimacy. Our UL verified technology that's previously been used to detect forgeries of fine art paintings. What? Right? Forecast hurricanes. Huh? Stop wildlife poachers. What is this thing? Right? And even discover new planets. Wait a second. So we've just taken it from controlling the climate in your home to like, no, we're freaking going intergalactic. And these are legitimate. These are all documented, et cetera. It's now been harnessed to control your home or office climate, saving customers money and saving you time and labor on maintenance. So it's like, that was the whole thing. And then it was part of their spiel when they were unleashing it at a trade show. So come discover the first revolution in indoor climate control since 1919. That changed it. And then it was the name, because all these names, what were these names? These names are what? Lennox, Daikin, Train, Carrier, Nordyne, Bryant, Rheem, all just like whatever. We came up with Cocoon. because cocoon had that, it was, you felt like you were being nurtured, something from a cocoon. What happened? You evolved and transformed into a new life form with beautiful wings and beautiful color. So cocoon had an element of warmth and protection. And it was the most affordable indoor heating and cooling solution on earth. And here's the interesting thing. It's not the cheapest by any stretch of the imagination. We didn't say it was the cheapest. We said it's the most affordable because year 2, year 3, year 4, you will be saving so much freaking money because of and the maintenance, because of the fact that it could literally, all the diagnostics can be tapped into remotely by these companies that handle HVAC repair and maintenance. So on every front, it changed the dialogue. So that's just an example. Cocoon, nothing sounded like Cocoon. Everything sounded like a company. Now all of a sudden we have something that's warm, that's alive, that has a pulse.
This is so interesting. So with that statement that you mentioned for that company, what was the technique establishing that foundation? Because you mentioned a few things where you wanted to create credibility. So you used kind of I forget what it was, UV or something like that.
UL listed. Yep.
Right. So UL. So obviously that was credibility. Then you also added some stats, but you weren't born with the stats. And then as well as some other hooks that allowed you to kind of facilitate this curiosity, like, oh, this is not just related into the indoor stuff. It's more of this and planetary and this and that. So now I'm intrigued. We'll explain a little bit further, right? So I'm curious. And to me, I feel like there's a lot of parts that you put into that.
Yeah.
And I love for our listeners, if you could just explain the evolution of that. Maybe obviously phase 1, it was this long paragraph, and then you obviously munched it down. What did we take away? What did we include? How did we adjust it to make sure that it became streamlined, what you just mentioned? What was that evolution process and the techniques?
Well, we knew that here's the things that we knew that we couldn't do. We couldn't say, hey, this is the best. Okay, everyone else is saying they're the best. That's ridiculous. We could have said the most revolutionary. How? I mean, you can't just drop how do we take a distinction and move it from our opinion and our enthusiasm into something substantial and substantiated in the world? Like this technology actually has detected, like, these master original paintings that you would see in museums in Europe and throughout the US. How does it detect forgeries? Are you kidding me? And the other thing is, another key criterion was, does anything we're saying, does it open the door for further conversation? Does it make me curious? Or does it make me go, oh, okay. See, anything that results in oh, okay, off the table, get it the hell out of there, because I want this conversation to go on. I don't want to just say something and say, hey, the best in the world. Even Mars would agree. You're like, what are you talking about? Next, pass me the coffee, you know? So each of those was very deliberate, and we knew in this particular case the villain wasn't punched up as much, but the hero here was the aspiration. The aspiration was, hey, first of all, the idea of climate control is great. The idea of saving money is great. But if you can actually do that with technologies that have done things with pieces of original artwork that are hundreds of years old, and planets that are billions of years old, and galaxies and natural phenomena that is unpredictable, that destroys billions in property and homes and life. If you could, you're saying all of that can actually power, you can harness that to actually have me have a wonderful, comfortable, fantastic home or office, work environment, or home environment. So that was the thing. So we brought it, we went really big with absolutely documentable evidence, but we weren't burdening them with facts. We were telling a little narrative, saying, hey, here's this amazing stuff. How come it's been kept out there in the ethers and not brought to your home for you can actually benefit? That's the subtext.
So this is very interesting, because one of the things, and this is kind of basic a little bit, but I like to kind of evolve it a little bit further. the customer has evolved, just, culturally, that is. And what I mean by that is like certain things that we used to say, like made in America, we've got the best customer service, family owned since 19 whatever, right? A lot of those things don't bring as much value
Right.
as compared to other things now.
Right.
And I love to just kind of what you've seen in regards to, because we still see that advertising, and I'm still talking a little bit about brick and mortar kind of companies, but also, I see a lot of digital marketing. We're the best customer service, or like, hey, what makes you different? We're better, blah, 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 like very similar, like the same kind of things. And it's like, no, that doesn't really disrupt the customer's kind of thought process to get them intrigued and curiosity. So I'd love for you to kind of explain what you have seen. You've been in the industry for many, many years, worked with that evolution of that culture. And so what have you noticed kind of is carries more weight and value base more so than what it used to be, like made in America and just what I just mentioned?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I mean, there's one thing that you could take to the bank, that different is better than better, right? Why? Because of the fact that if I'm going, well, we're better, I'm still in the same box as the other companies and competitors. And there's no shortage of companies or competitors in any industry, right? If I'm buying sneakers, there's a gazillion brands. Car, gazillion brands. Something to wear, gazillion brands. Paint for the walls, brand. So there's no shortage, whatever. Restaurants to eat at. So the bottom line is that's why different is better than better, because better still keeps me, I'm still playing according to the rules that have already been set. Why do I want that? Because that means I'm only incrementally, I'd rather go freaking, why do I want to do an evolution when I can actually introduce a revolution? People respond to the revolution. So the things are, when we use these cliches, what you described are cliches. Made in the USA, cliche. Family owned, cliche. Knowledgeable staff, cliche. Caring personnel, cliche. Et cetera, et cetera. Every industry has its cliches. And for those listening to this right now, I would give them this challenge. Write down the cliches in your industry. Like, what are all your competitors saying? That's just like, it's kind of like the usual suspects, the stuff that everyone repeats. Oh, we'll match your price, or best rates in town, or whatever, right? Any of those, you write those cliches down, and then you cross-check it against your own brand. Literally go, oh crap, that it will be humbling, because you'll go, oh damn. We thought, and here's the thought process. We thought since everyone was saying it, we had to say it too. Right? That's the general thinking. Because if we don't say that, then people aren't going to take it. No, if you say that, you're going to sound like everyone else. Do you really want to sound like everyone else? Because if you sound like everyone else, you're going to basically be perceived as everyone else, and you're going to now become a commodity, and now you're going to compete on price. There's your actual ladder of devaluation right there. So now I know that all started with a specific question. What the heck was the question? Did I answer the question?
Well, you did, and it's interesting that you keep saying this, because it's so powerful in regards to kind of the reiteration of hey, you know what, if we keep doing the same thing, and I think it's one of those misconceptions of, hey, success leaves clues. So it's
Right.
like, oh, this company over here is successful, so let me start doing kind of what they're doing and mimicking a little bit. And what happens is you just basically grab that same taste, and everybody's already experienced that taste of vanilla, and they don't want that. They want chocolate, they want this, right? And you have to identify that. And I love this. So you're basically saying, and I love what you said here, difference is better than better. So it's really being different. And I love what you even did in just regarding, like, hey, find out what everybody's saying generically, and literally almost reverse engineer it, and literally throw stones at that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this person's saying something different. This person's, doing something different. Our industry specifically, everybody talks about, being passionate about what you do. And I'm like, oh, cool. Okay, wonderful. So take that and obviously reverse engineer it. It's not so much about being passionate about what you do. It's about being passionate about the results of what you do creates. And that's a slight different opinion on it. So I'd love to talk a little bit about persuasion. I find so interesting sales, marketing, branding. It's so powerful, because it's storytelling, but it's It's persuading them. It's persuading them into building them into the ecosystem. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take HVAC, because we see it in Nike and Apple, and those are very well established brands, and they do such an excellent job because they make it sleek and sexy. And if you think about it, Apple's just a computer software. It's just a computer, a company, and a phone company, whatever. But they make it sound so sexy because they've done such a great job. But that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up HVAC, because it's such an odd industry, but yet you were able to really dial that in. And so these same characteristics. So my question is, how do you, leveraging story, hero, villain, how do you elicit emotion in maybe your advertising, maybe your brand, maybe the story itself for that customer to be attracted to your brand? What does that look like?
Well, the hero oftentimes is the aspiration, right? It's that kind of like, ooh, that freedom to do, that freedom to be, that freedom to have. That's usually the thing. Well, here's what we have to understand in business and in life. Everything that we take for granted today was at one point an innovation. The telephone. At one point, there were no telephones. It was an innovation. At one point, there were no computers. Innovation. At one point, there were no computers, or not all these computers, but or even cameras, right? So at one point there were no books. Okay, before Gutenberg's movable type, there were no books. So yeah, everything they were one-offs, right? They're originals. Now all of a sudden, everything we take for granted today was at one point an innovation. Good. Now, nothing stays still. Ever since that innovation, depending on each industry moves at a different speed. But let's say, I'll give you a perfect example. When I started in the industry of my business, there were no computers. That was not part of the landscape. You didn't walk in and see desks covered with computers. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have mobile devices. Okay. We had drawing boards and different stuff. And I jokingly tell people, yes. And there were dinosaurs walking in the streets. But the thing is this. So no computers. Now what happens is, I think it was about maybe 5 years into the industry, we had a breakthrough. Fax machines, man. Whoa. Fax machines. So instead of you having to send out, you get a request from a potential client and you have to send them how? By mail, because there wasn't Federal Express back then either. And so the thing is by mail, you would have to send them a proposal or a quote. And that would take days. And now we've knocked days into something that would be by today's standards be considered intolerable, but it would take about 4 minutes for you to actually get a document sent over a fax machine from your office to theirs. Wow, we just knocked out days off of it. And then now all of a sudden, then the internet comes in and email. So now all of a sudden, so each of these things, today's current standard is oftentimes the villain. And why? Because industries get comfortable. Industries get complacent. Oh, that's great. That's our cash cow. We're gonna milk that baby until we're just gonna line our pockets, man. And that's one of the great things that I loved about Steve Jobs. His work ethic was this. He was, as soon as they came out with their newest whatever, whether it was the iPod or the iPhone or the iPad or whatever, they were like, good, what's the next iteration of that? Because they knew, Steve Jobs knew, and he built it into the culture. If we do not make if we're not the ones that are going to actually make our creations obsolete, someone else is going to do it. So that factor right there. So they were willing to be the continuous hero because they realized what they did yesterday, that may have just come out today, was the new villain. So today's hero becomes tomorrow's villain. There's your evolution right there. And if you understand that, you will implement that every day, you will never be caught unaware. You'll never be caught, damn it, someone stole our thunder. Well, yeah, no, they didn't steal your thunder. They took advantage of your complacency and laziness is what they actually did. So that's the thing to understand. When you get that, man, that becomes, that becomes a superpower. All of a sudden people are like, damn, how'd you know? Well, let's see. Let's look at every evolution.
So, and this is really interesting because, see, I could imagine some of our audience like, well, I've got limited budget. I'm a small company, or, I'm a mid-sized company, or whatever it is. And you mentioned something here on your website, which is just incredible, rising above the noise. It says how to outsmart Goliath in your industry.
Mhm.
And I think we all have some sort of person out there or company or whatever that we say, okay, hey, that's our target that we want to be beyond. And what I find so interesting is small companies or medium-sized companies can do things that other big companies are not able to. And you've done very well because you work with some very, very large brands, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies to medium-sized brands as well. And so I'd love for you to, help me understand or share with our audience kind of the different things that competitively medium-sized and small companies have an advantage over compared to Goliath.
Oh, every day of the week. And to the just one point to make clear is I love working with small and medium-sized companies because one, they lack the layers of bureaucratic internal politics. They and they don't have to have like a committee that is going to basically bottleneck. And I tell clients outright, if you've got a committee, I'm basically will not work with you. That's different from if you have a team of 2 or 3 founders, that's different. I'm not talking, but you have like a committee of like 8, 10, 12 people, and they've all got to somehow sit and suck the life out of everything. Well, what if this and what if that and blah, 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 blah. They'll bring it down to the lowest common denominator of vanilla. Oh, okay. We all agree on this, which means we all concur that this will insult the least number of people. But they never talked about, wait, is this going to actually differentiate and actually be meaningful and memorable and actually have traction in the marketplace? So they were totally wrong criteria. And at the same time, in those committees, you have someone who's been with the company for 2 weeks, and you have someone who's been with the company for 40 years, and they're both treated as though their level of experience and insight is equal, which it's not. So when it comes to this innovation, the power of a small company is that it's nimble. The power of a small company is it can actually do things that bigger companies can't or won't. I'll give you an example. There's a company just had lunch. No, we actually sat over coffee a couple of weeks ago. Now she's multimillionaire. Totally. And she wasn't. She was a mom with 4 kids who was restless. She didn't like being just a mom at home. Didn't utilize all of her creative juices. So she started creating this little business on the side. Her husband worked at a big Fortune 500 company. And she starts this thing literally on her kitchen table. It's sort of the stereotypical entrepreneurs, poverty, empty pot to riches. And now she's literally a multi-millionaire. Okay. And so we were talking about this very journey of hers. And I said, there's one thing that you guys can do because of the business that they were in. They were in the space of basically providing party favors. And the thing that happens with parties, like bachelorette parties and bridal showers and baby showers, oftentimes there's a lot of little details to handle. It's a pain in the butt. And you end up things get missed, names get forgotten. What if you actually can have a company that actually could provide this total service and everything arrives perfect? All you got to do is just take it out of the box and just like put it on the tables and everyone's happy. And it makes sure that your event is not going to be a nightmare, but your event's going to actually be a wonderful moment in the future. Cool. Well, here's a very simple thing that I told them to do that any business can implement right now. I said, I want you, after 10 days, after you've shipped the product, I want you to actually and we designed a beautiful thing, beautiful little thing to go in an envelope. I want you to actually do a handwritten message that actually says, hey, Louise, so glad we were able to help you. How'd your party go? How did your guests love the stuff? Da, 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 and just be engaged in that way. And the owner, when I suggested this, she goes, "Oh, you mean like send out an email?" I said, "You send out an email, and we'll break your finger, and I'll break your knuckles. You send out an email, I'm breaking your freaking knuckles." Everyone's doing emails. Everyone's doing automated stuff. Amazon does it better than anybody. Come on. I said, you're going to actually write it. You're going to put an actual stamp on the envelope. Then you're going to actually send it and figure out how many you could do per day, because they had enough shipments. And so I think they maxed out maybe 75 per day that they could actually do before someone got writer's cramp. And so the response back was off the charts. No one could believe that anybody took the time to be that interested, that engaged, and take the time. We are in a time in business. Everyone's trying to increase their efficiencies so much that it dehumanizes the experience. That is costing companies so much in terms of loyalty. They're losing clients because of that loyalty. They don't have the loyalty because you're telling me that I'm not worth a little note. I mean, and even to this point, it's a silly little thing that I do. But as soon as my iPhone could show me exactly who was calling and stuff like that, and there was one time I just did it as a prank, and a client of mine called up. And let's say it's you, right? Let's say you were calling me up. I saw the phone, and I did this. I said, "Hello, Christian Evans' dedicated hotline. How may I help you?" Right? And so whoever that was, that first person, they laughed for about 60 seconds. They were like, "Oh my God." They were like, "How cool is that?" Right? Now let's look at what that took me. That took me about 6 seconds. It took me, but more importantly than that, it took me giving a damn. And it took me being so stubborn that I refused to blend in and say, "Hi, this is David," which everyone would do. Everyone and their mother, 99.999% of people, that's the way they answer the phone. "Hi, this is David. Hi, this is Todd. Hi, this is Barry." Why? Why are you willing? The question is, why are you willing to just be another cog in the wheel of everyday life? Why aren't you willing to disrupt? So if you start to disrupt and you do that with enough things, you will be known for that. The things that you most commonly do as a company is what you and I will be known as. And if I am sort of disinterested and I do things in a half-ass way, and all the details aren't nailed down, and this and that, I'll be known as the sloppy company. No matter what branding message I put out, no matter what beautiful graphics, gorgeous design, and all that kinds of, no matter what, because you lost me. Okay, so there's a couple of examples.
This is so brilliant. And what I love about this, and I'm so glad we went here, and you just mentioned, I want to reemphasize this, dehumanize experience. And my gracious, because you're exactly right. You hit a key point. And I hear we can get bought into this very simply, definitely growing companies in growth mode. And it's like, okay, how do we automate this? How do we do this? How do we even automate all this, testimonials and case studies and all this stuff? And the reality is you can't. Sometimes it's scaling the unscalable. And sometimes that takes a lot of manpower, but that's how you differentiate yourself from everybody else. One of the things that I found, I want to loop in network marketing. The reason why is because I find their culture, sometimes they do an excellent job. And the reason why is because when you have someone experience a product or service, and then what they realize, it's not just about the product or service. Now it's my story. Oh, this is able to help me do X, Y, Z. And that's the reason why. And I was able to see this result in my life because of this product. Now what happens is it's not about the product anymore. You're selling your story, and people buy into that story like, wow, you know what? I've actually seen my energy increase, and I've seen this. Whether it works or doesn't, it doesn't matter. But that's what I found so interesting. They become the best brand awareness, but also what happens is that customer will never leave from that empire. And the reason why is because that experience. So my question, talking a little bit about dehumanizing experience and trying to eliminate that, when you're working with small and medium-sized companies, what other touch points do you think some of these companies could start implementing with their customers and making sure that, okay, hey, how do we readjust? How do we optimize this experience so that it becomes a really amazing experience? And what I mean by this is sometimes it's like, hey, when they get something in the mail, we've all heard of unpacking. It's like, wow, this is amazing. Look, it's so pretty. It's so cool. That experience as well. But also, even going from a sales phone call to, hey, you know what? I want to introduce you to Betsy. Betsy is going to be your representative, your project manager for your account, and I just want to introduce you. And Becky, Betsy, whatever, is able to introduce to the new client, right? That handoff from sales to marketing, or the back end of customer success, certain touch points to make, wow, that was a really good experience. And just, you mentioned a few other key points, but I'd love for you to maybe branch a little bit further how we can take your brand, you get clarity on it, and integrate it and sprinkle it into certain touch points in your business.
100%. All right. So the thing is when you look at, there's something that I cover in my book, Brand Intervention. I call it the 66% rule. There's pre-sales branding, during the sales branding, and post-sales branding. All companies do basically the first and the second, which is pre-sales. That's advertising, promotion, whatever. And then during the sale, during the sale or during the delivery. Hey, and that's basically what many will know as customer service or whatever. It's fulfilling. It could be fulfilling the order. It could be actually like in the case of a salon, it would be, you don't pay until you're actually gotten your hair cut or whatever. And so, but that's like during the sale. But most companies, and when I say most, I'm probably talking in excess of 95%, they do nothing on the post-sales branding. That means after, so they incorrectly consider, oh, we have been paid, that sales activity, that sales cycle is over. You could not be more wrong. If you're an entrepreneur and a business owner that is listening to this, you could not be more wrong. That's actually when your relationship actually starts. Clients do not expect us to do very much afterward because of this trend. So when you actually do something afterward, there's two things you're doing. One is you're exceeding the expectations. Okay. We must at all times exceed expectations. Every time, every day of the week. If I'm a store and I say I'm going to open up at 9, I'm going to close at 5, and I open up at 9 and close at 5, I don't think that there's going to be customers going, whoa, dude, he opened at 9 and he said he was going to open at 9 and he did. It's like, I don't think anyone's going to celebrate. Or he closed at 5 and he didn't close at 4:59. That is so commendable. I'm going to stay loyal to him or her. No, ain't going to happen. So meeting expectations it's a death sentence. You must always exceed expectations. That's one thing. The other thing is this third phase of branding that I'm talking about. It incorporates this thing which divides the geniuses from the wannabe geniuses, the extremely affluent entrepreneurs from the moderately successful. It's this. The greatest brands, the greatest leaders, the greatest entrepreneurs all incorporate more future into what they do. So in other words, what does that mean? That means if I, like you and I had a conversation before we actually started this conversation, started this episode, this podcast. I asked you some questions. And if you look at every one of those questions had to do with what? The future. Who's going to hear this? How's this? Where's this going to be heard? Where will this live? Right? That all had to do with the future, because by taking responsibility for and knowing the future of where this is going to be used, heard, seen, digested, I could actually now connect more dots having to do with the future. Our greatest bits of equipment that we love, whether it be a smartphone or a car or a sneaker or something in our office or something in our home, is the stuff that it's the stuff that we all of a sudden we need something, and all of a sudden we look to do it and we're like, oh, that company already anticipated I was going to be doing that. What an awesome company, right? We love those moments. Wow, they actually have a button for that. Oh, wow, they have a feature for that. Oh, wow, they knew I was going to want this when I ate it or when I read it or when I did. That's the difference. So we're putting future. The greatest companies will put more future. The greatest companies will anticipate. They'll know that handoff is going to be exceptional, and that handoff is going to be memorable. And that's the beginning. And you're laying more seeds for more future loyalty, more future business, more future demand.
Now, this is a very interesting subject. And the reason why I say this is because I love how you're talking about the anticipation of what this is. And I know Steve Jobs was an excellent, visionary in this regard, where, okay, hey, now we have all these smartphones and so forth. I think Jeff Bezos is what he's doing with Alexa is very interesting as well, because it is very voice command, where, hey, you know what, can you go do this, XYZ, boom. And all of a sudden now he's in millions upon millions of homes, and now that presence is there. And again, it's solidifying and collapsing that time frame as much as possible. So let's unpack this a little bit further. One of the things I always found, and I was asking myself one question, and one of the responses that I kind of got was, hey, how do you create a $1 billion brand? And one of the things that I discovered when I was talking to someone, he'd say, hey, make it bigger than yourself. It's not about yourself. And I thought, oh, that's really excellent. I love that approach. And then as well as the anticipating, hey, what are people desire? What are people wanting? So I've been mainly focusing on podcasts, and that's kind of what I focus on and so forth. And so I'm always asking myself, how can I do something different than everybody else is doing? And one of the things I came to this conclusion was writing articles or publishing articles or publishing the podcast as an article on behalf of the guest, and then feature them in those things. And I think you and we mentioned that, and you're like, oh, that's brilliant. This is unbelievable. And one of the things that I found so interesting is a lot of they do blog posts, they do all this other stuff, but because it's cost effective for them. But also one of the things is that expectation. I wasn't expecting that, and I found that very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about leveraging technology.
Yep.
And integrating that into that anticipation of like you were saying, hey, I already know you're going to want this. Here this is, and it's just it's not just about increasing sales, but it's about also maybe the desire or need for something else that they have in their life and customer base.
100%. Well, again, another example, just because it's done so well, again, it comes down to this. And it's like the exercise I talked about earlier. Any one of us can look at our industry, and this is absolutely an exercise that anyone listening can do. They can literally say, what are the usual actions that are done? Right? That's the usual. The usual is always going to be less than what's possible. Just know that. The usual is always less than what's possible. So you need to be about what's possible. You need to go north of that. So, like, for example, I've yet to ever speak to anybody who when they got their iPhone and brought their iPhone, opened the box of their iPhone, wasn't just kind of like a little giddy kid who with a teenage infatuation, because the material is flawless. The corners are flawless. It slips off flawlessly. It has the little plastic thing on top perfectly in its place, with the little tongue thing that you pick up perfectly to discover the little wonderful things they have perfectly placed underneath. It's like nothing is haphazard. Nothing is, oops, that got a little jiggied when it no. And the printing is flawless. And the texture is flawless. Look at how many senses and things we have done. Right? I mean, touch and color and feel and quality. We feel it. It's crazy. There's not a single other company that does that. Except, I mean, they probably, except for someplace like, you go to like those super high-end stores where, okay, you spend $15,000 for whatever. And yeah, that box is going to be, holy shit, Batman. And so that's that. It's just that kind of thing. It's like, do they need to do that? If they want to be seen as amazing, they do. But that's the part of the question that most people don't have when they're plotting out these things. It's like, do we need to do that? That question normally falls in the realm of the COO, who's kind of chief of operations. Okay, they're making sure about efficiencies and margins. Don't let them near customer experience. Don't. Put a restraining order on them. That's it. You can't, you're within 50 feet. Get the hell out of this room. What are you doing? Right? That's because anybody that's going to say, well, is it necessary? Please complete the rest of the sentence. Is it necessary if we want to be seen as the absolute, hero for our customer? That will change your answer. Is it necessary is not the complete question. The complete question is it necessary if we want to continue to be the hero for our clients and have the kind of customer loyalty that our competitors envy? That's the complete question, not is it necessary?
Let me ask you in regards to a situation I had. I was having a conversation, it was many months ago now, and they were about a $3-5 million business, and their niche were like CEOs. And I said, you got to do something different. And so they were like, well, this is, and I said, what have you tried? And I came up with this conclusion because they tried all these, events, and they did this cold email and cold calling. Everybody's doing that. And so I said, hey, what if you do a poop emoji, a big poop emoji, and you send it to that person, and it says, hey, are you tired of having to deal with shit? Give us a call. And obviously the company's name and so forth, because they were a consulting agency, etc.
Yeah.
Anyways, and I said, and they said, well, that's cool, but it doesn't align with our brand. And so my question to you is, I get where they were coming from, but it was a very front end, top of funnel marketing and advertising strategy to hook them and really cause a differentiation and really create curiosity. And I even asked when I was doing the presentation, because he said, oh, you know what, I didn't really care for it. I said, why didn't you care for it? Well, because it's kind of not aligned with your brand. But I said, did it catch your attention? He said, yeah, it did. I said, that's the point. And so again, there's a lot of direct response, right, that you could kind of facilitate to grab people's attention, but also you want to make sure that there is alignment with your brand.
Right.
And so I love for you to kind of talk to me about that teeter totter a little bit, and
Right.
maybe just different strategies or tactics that you could still align yourself, grabbing the hooks, like you were saying, but
Yeah.
doing it in a professional way. I thought it was a kind of a creative idea, but I'd love to get your perspective on it, David.
It would very much depend on that audience. If you were doing that, let's say the company was based in the UK, I'd say probably because they tend to be like extremely well mannered, and so we're going to. Would you like to have a spot of tea? You sort of like you have that sort of conversation like that. That probably wouldn't necessarily, a poop emoji probably wouldn't necessarily go with that particular audience. But if it was a little more of a rebellious audience, it might actually work quite well. On the flip side, taking the UK example, I mean, maybe you have, maybe you have the principals of the company, and instead of it being the Fab Four walking across Abbey Road, maybe it's now the principals, and you send something along like that. It's just being understanding to your audience, and it's being intelligent. One of the biggest liabilities with regard to entrepreneurs is they get lazy and impatient with their observation. They don't look, and then they don't and really discern. Like, for example, I love when I hear from a client, hey, I say, who's your audience? They go, women. I'm like, what women? Because a 15-year-old female does not have the same mentality as a 45-year-old female, and they're both women. A woman who's postmenopausal probably has a different mentality than a woman who's at 25 years old and ascending as a career professional, or a 25-year-old woman who's a career professional versus a 25-year-old single mom with 3 kids. So what women? So the bottom line is be insatiable in your curiosity. Ask the questions. Don't get lazy. Right? Like, I remember a great ad. I just thought it was a brilliant ad. For some reason, this particular point is making me think of it. Blauplankt was a I don't even know if they're still in business, but they were a German speaker company. Okay. And in America, German engineering and all kinds of stuff, we appreciate it's like it's going to last forever. It's made, it's whatever. And so, but Blauplankt, I remember it. I remember hearing the ad. There was some ad, and I remember this line, and I thought it was so brilliant. It's like, and they were promoting their headphone set, and it was something like Blauplunked speakers for people with ears and something between them. I thought it was such a brilliant. I was like, how cool is that? What a cool freaking line, right? And I was like, that's cool, right? They didn't stop at for people with ears. That would be like, okay, for people with ears. So Vincent Van Gogh can't be a client because what, he has one? I mean, what's the deal?
Oh, that's brilliant. I love it. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because we're talking just branding, but also just the fun entertainment of it. I think, and I remember specifically some of the Coca-Cola during Christmas time, some of the best. I mean, just it gets me every time, some of those little, polar bear and family and, whatever. And Amazon has done some really great ones with Alexa and that little smile and whatever. I'm thinking, oh, that's brilliant. I didn't even know it was an Amazon commercial. And sometimes that's the emotion. And one of the things that I always found so interesting is, I sit back and analyze it, because coming from a digital marketing side of things, and I say, what kind of emotion am I experiencing, and why did what caused that? And I start analyzing it and looking back, and the same thing with Super Bowl commercials. And there's a lot that goes into it, David. And I appreciate you talking. I know we could talk a lot about it, the story, the hero, the villain, how to smooth that process in your branding and integrate it with each touch point in your customer journey within your company, and making sure that it's down into your culture and your ecosystems, and just this amazing conversation around this. And that's one of the reasons why I want to make sure when we have this conversation with you, that it's not just some basic level colors and logo. There's so much more that goes into it. And so I appreciate your time and just being on here, man. How can they reach out to you, bud, and how can they be part of what you got going on, my man?
Well, bottom line is people certainly should stop by risingabovethenoise.com, RISING, and they've got tons of great examples where you really can see what's possible to the transformative. And, and I want all entrepreneurs to know, I remember there's one, I also do besides working with companies directly, of all varying sizes, my whole thing is, I kind of say it real simply that, my job is helping stubborn, unapologetic entrepreneurs become wealthy, stubborn, unapologetic entrepreneurs. And so, but the interesting thing is that that's why I also put together a 9-week masterclass. I mean, one of the guys, and this is perfect, to your point that you made earlier, he was like, before I started this masterclass, I was convinced that branding was something done by these really, really big companies with big, deep pockets, and they would just do something pretty and something like you'd see on TV or something like that. He goes, it couldn't be more farther from the truth. And so he learned how to apply this to his business. He took his company, and it was just a few tweaks. They were just a few yards away from the gold mine. They went from a $1 million company to a $20 million company in 12 months, because that's the kind of impact you can have. And that is totally achievable. So certainly people can reach out to me on LinkedIn, all the various social platforms. Risingabovethenoise.com is certainly a place to connect. LinkedIn, certainly you'll see my stuff on there routinely and daily. And if the people hearing this are like, hey, I want 9 weeks, because that 9-week window is not only a program, it's also a mentorship. I every Saturday morning for 9 weeks in a row, I work with all the entrepreneurs, and it's so exciting. We literally have the one that's coming up. We have entrepreneurs from Poland, from the UK, and throughout the US. We don't have any. We usually have like 1 or 5 Canadians, but this one, no Canadians this time. So no one's going to go, eh? So
That's awesome. And guys, those links will be in the description below. That's risingabovethenoise.com. And he's got so many resources on there. Plus, he's got incredible stuff on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. And we'll make sure we include all those links. And then also his book, Brand Intervention, which is on Amazon. So we'll make sure we include that down there below. David, I just appreciate the immense value that you brought. And just like you mentioned, I think it's so remarkable. I think sometimes we think about branding as that big thing, and people, large companies, they could just throw a lot of money and subconsciously get into it, and that's cool. But also there are certain things that you can trickle throughout your company at this stage, so that when you get to that 8 and like you mentioned 8 and 9 figure, there were just a few tweaks that was preventing you from achieving and establishing that larger company. Just a really, really incredible. And I love, before we let you go fully, love to ask you, is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
If you have a hunch, a fire in your belly, all I can tell you is shyness and humility are overinflated crocs of bullshit. Don't fall for it. Pick up the freaking phone, reach out to Christian, reach out to me, lean into it. Be willing to like, just lean in, because the bottom line is man, the world right now really needs some good leadership, really needs some brilliant entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs breathe a lot of life into culture, and a lot of the magic and inspiration that we experience on a daily basis, don't take those for granted. That came into existence because of someone just very much possibly like you listening to this right now. So do it, go into action, reach out, and let's get this party started.
And that is the slayer of the mundane, the CEO of DBD International, my friend, David Brier. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can.
Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review, and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. That's christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. Always love to hear some feedback, and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast, and until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.